Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it as we limp through all of this. So glad to see everybody here today, even on a rainy day. So today we're going to explore childhood through the lens of Eugene Field. He was born in St. Louis in 1850. He was a writer and a reporter, and late in his life he became a beloved poet, writing many poems about childhood. His own childhood was scarred by the death of his mother when he was 6 years old. His father, Roswell Field, was an attorney who actually defended Dred Scott, the famous enslaved person who was suing for his freedom. Now, perhaps due to the fact that his father's career was so busy, his father sent him east to live with his cousin in New England to be schooled and raised. Now, Eugene, as he grew up, was more interested in being a jokester than a student. Many of his pranks included luring one of his tutors into a pit that was filled with mud, and the tutor fell up to his neck. At one of his colleges, he set off a cannon at midnight and then later painted the president of the college's house in the colors of the college. Well, he bounced from one school to another and ended up dropping out. He soon married his beloved Julia. They had 8 children. Only 5 of them made it through childhood, which is a survival percentage pretty typical of that era. Their growing family moved around following their father's journalism career from St. Louis to Kansas City to Denver and ultimately to Chicago. Now, Eugene garnered moderate fame as a satirical writer of essays. He made fun of corruption in governments, and he bemoaned the widespread inhumane treatment of the working class and the poor. But he was less of a political muckraker and more of a cultural commentator, particularly when writing his column, Sharps and Flats, for the Chicago Morning News. Now, he praised the energy and the culture of this burgeoning city, and he lampooned the grotesque materialism that he saw. His insights into American culture actually were very useful to the many immigrants arriving in Chicago to work at the factories and the slaughterhouses. The constant stink of the meat production led Eugene Field to call Chicago Porkopolis. His 160,000 readers delighted in the humorous, most often sacrilegious writings that made fun of everyone. And often his whimsical and sardonic humor took the form of advice columns that gave bad advice to children, telling them to do naughty things like eat a wormy apple, or pet a wasp, or put mud in babies' ears. Now, Field's work evolved and became a little less biting. One writer explained that his columns grew to encompass those softer qualities of the human temperament. Another claimed that Field went through a sweetening process, which made his works gentler. His sentimental essays about children were particularly popular, and late in his life, he began to write poetry. In 1888, he published his most famous poem, Little Boy Blue. He was so pleased with the public praise and the increasing sales that he churned out poem after poem and went on a national lecture circuit, and known as America's Poet of Childhood. Now, Field found inspiration in the works of children's writers throughout the world. He collected lullabies and songs and folk tales and legends from around the globe that were in his library at home. He liked making unique and unusual books using colored ink, and he had a lifelong search for lovely books which adorned his study. There was a book published right after he died describing his search for books entitled The Love Affairs of a Bibliomaniac. Now, one biographer, Robert Conroe, underscored an important reason why Field cared so much about books. Conroe wrote, "Books were, according to Field, dependable and did not change. People were otherwise. They might laugh and cry, but inevitably they grew old and died," end quote. So maybe books offered Field the sort of security he was searching for after having lost his mother and been separated from his father at such an early age. Maybe that also contributed to his hobby of collecting toys, to capture and hold on to childhood, perhaps. He liked dolls in particular. People could die, but the well-crafted toys of the 19th century made of wood and tin and leather lasted well beyond one lifetime. Parents everywhere were painfully aware of that fact because in 1875, 1 out of every 3 children died before adulthood. That was the poignant heart of Little Boy Blue. Now, Little Boy Blue refers to a toy soldier, red and rusting, sitting on a shelf of a child's room long after the child has died, standing guard in vain anticipation of the child's return. To this day, Eugene's home office has all these toys, and when he was alive, he would share these toys with the young visitors. And many of the parents who came with their kids commented that they weren't sure who was more delighted by the encounter, the children or Field. Which brings me to these important aspects of Field's life: his love for, his identification with, and his idealization of children. Let me start with his love for children. I have to take pains to explain that it was a type of love that was not quite what you or I might expect. It was not simple or direct. Field was honest about his conflicted feelings to a degree. He had a candid confession in an 1894 pamphlet called his Auto-Analysis. He wrote it because as he got famous, more and more people were asking him for background information, so he decided to produce this, and in his own words, to quote, "Give these facts, confessions, and observations for information of those who, for one reason or another, are constantly applying to me for biographical data concerning myself." Now, what he shares in that is actually fairly flattering. He explains that he dislikes politics, he didn't like talking about money, he hates war, he disapproved of capital punishment. But what struck many of his fans as a little odd were the following words. He said, "I do not love all children." What? How could that be? He had lifted so many children in his poems. He praises them as being precious and beautiful and innocent. Why not love them all? Well, he offers a little bit of an explanation, but I'm going to warn you, it may make it worse. He said, "I think I discovered that I love children insofar as I can make pets of them." Now, before condemning Field for comparing children to pets, he did love pets. In his Auto-Analysis, he wrote, "I am very fond of dogs, birds, and small pets, a passion not approved of by my wife." He added that if I had my way, I should make the abuse of horses, dogs, and cattle a penal offense. I should abolish all dog laws and dog catchers, and I would punish severely everybody who caught and caged birds. I have a cockatiel at home. I don't know whether he would scold me for that, but in the last years of his life, he was known for inviting neighborhood children into his yard where he would share fanciful stories of marvelous creatures, combinations of birds and crickets and other inhabitants of local woods and gardens. It seemed particularly clear, however, that Field loved his children. He didn't treat them as pets. He spent a lot of times delighting them. There was one example that he gave that I loved. His youngest son, he got giggling over and over again because he took a stuffed cat and put it up on a shelf. And then he would tie a string to it and hide the string, and then he'd pretend to shoot the cat and yell, "Bang!" And then he'd pull the string and the cat would tumble in a death fall. And the kid would just laugh and laugh and laugh every time his father put it up there. This is one reason to ask again, who was having more fun? So he identified with kids as if he was a child himself. Charles Henry Dennis, who was an office mate at the Chicago Daily News, suggests that Field had an attitude of one child to another. It was never more apparent than when Field was engaging in his hobby of making faces at children or otherwise teasing them, but only when he thought the parents weren't looking. Conrad said he was a little child among children. Now, he also shared in this biography that beneath the bravado, Field was still plagued by fears of a rebellious schoolboy. That rebellion famously took the form of pranks, which most people enjoyed. They were never done out of malice and not intended to do any harm, and people generally liked him for that. But some people didn't appreciate it. One person in particular didn't like when he got bawdy, which he could. He could get a little crude. The notorious Anthony Comstock of the Society for the Suppression of Vice was one who viewed Fields with suspicion. He tried to ban one of his poems that went a little too crude. But as I said, most of the world loved Fields' poems. And one reason was his ability to idealize children. His portrayals of childhood evoked warm, nostalgic feelings. The biographer wrote how the poet tapped into aspirations and hopes of very young people. And the public loves of poems, Conroy insisted, quote, indicate not so much what people actually believe, but more importantly, what they wanted to believe. I'll touch more on that later. But his ability to identify with children helped him capture their innocent wonder. As an office mate, Dennis, reported, he had the gift of child wondering, of the child's delight in all things strange and wonderful. At his funeral, a Reverend Bristol said that he embodied the greatness of faith and hope and love, the greatness of the child's spirit. And that's evident in the first of two of our poem songs that you'll hear soon. Both of the first two poems have to do with exploration of the imagination and around the world. The first, Wink and Blink and a Nod, carry us on a sailing trip through the dream world of a child. A wooden shoe is the boat that carries these three young sailors who are confident and courageous. Even the stars bend to the zeal of childhood. There are, of course, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod are the two eyes, winkin' and blinkin', and nod, the drowsy head of the child before they drift off to dreamland, assured by their mother that there's a safe to let go of the day, and they're released into this magical world. The second poem, The Wanderer, tells of a different type of journey. The words are spoken by someone who's traveled far away from home in the sea of childhood, and now they stand as an adult on the mountaintop, and they find a seashell, which they hold in their hand. And they long, looking at it, they think, how can I return to the sea? And is this the nostalgia we have for our own childhood? After we've climbed the mountain of life's achievements, do we long for the embrace of the ocean of youth? It wasn't unusual for immigrants at the end of the 19th century to long for their past, their displacement from their ancestral homes, along with the fast-paced changes of modernity, weighed heavily on their hearts. We'll explore them a bit more with two poems and performances. After the poem is read, you'll hear it sung by Robert Edwin, the original music of Rollin Wilber. Robert?
Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe. Sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. Where are you going and what do you wish? The old moon asked the three. We have come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we, said Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. The old moon laughed and sang a song as they rocked in the wooden shoe. And the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the waves of dew. The little stars were the herring fish that lived in that beautiful sea. Now cast your nets wherever you wish, never afeard are we, so cried the stars to the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. All night long their nets they threw to the stars in the twinkling foam. Then down from the skies came the wooden shoe, bringing the fishermen home. 'Twas all so pretty a sail it seemed as if it could not be. And some folks thought 'twas a dream they'd dream of sailing that beautiful sea. But I shall name you the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. Wynken and Blynken are two little eyes, and Nod is a little head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while mother sings of wonderful sights that be, and you shall see the beautiful things as you rock in the misty sea, where the old shoe rocked the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. Wynken and Blynken and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe. Sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. Where are you going and what do you wish? The old moon asked the three. We have come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we, said Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. The old moon laughed and sang a song as they rocked in the wooden shoe. And the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the waves of dew. The little stars were the herring fish that lived in that beautiful sea. Now cast your nets wherever you wish, never a fear are we. So cried the stars to the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. All night long their nets they threw to the stars and the twinkling foam. Then down from the skies came the wooden shoe, bringing the fishermen home. 'Twas all so pretty a sail it seemed, as if it could not be. And some folks thought 'twas a dream they'd dream of sailing that beautiful sea. But I shall name you the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. Wynken and Blynken are two little eyes, and Nod is a little head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while mother sings of wonderful sights that be. And you shall see the beautiful things as you rock in the misty sea, where the old shoe rocked the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod.
Sometime, Eugene Field.
The Wanderer.
The Wanderer.
Thank you. Legs and brains are connected.
He's on drugs, folks.
Unfortunately not. The Wanderer. I knew that.
No, you didn't.
The Wanderer by Eugene Field. Upon a mountain height, far from sea, I found a shell, and to my listening ear, the lonely thing, ever a song of ocean seemed to sing, ever a tale of ocean seemed to tell. How came the shell upon the mountain height? Ah, who can say whether there dropped by some too careless hand, or whether they're cast when ocean swept the land, ere the Eternal had ordained the day. Strange, was it not? Far from its native deep, one song it sang. Sang of the awful mysteries of the tide, sang of the misty sea, profound and wide, ever with echoes of the ocean rang, as the shell upon the mountain height sings of the sea. So do I ever, leagues and leagues away, so do I ever, wandering where I may. Sing, O my home, sing, O my home, of thee.
Whether they're dropped by some too careless hand, or whether they're cast when ocean swept the land, ere the Eternal had ordained the day. Strange was it not, far from its native deep, one song it sang. do I ever leagues and leagues away. So do I ever, wondering where I may, sing oh my home, sing oh my home of thee.
Wow. Sing, O my home, sing, O my home of thee. At the end of the 19th century, America was singing loudly about their home. Oh, say can you see, they sang. Over the course of a single lifetime, from the Civil War up into the 20th century, the United States had come of age, as they say. And one important change was an evolution in thought about how children and childhood should be seen. Our nation was edging away from the antebellum assumption that children were primarily economic resources, workhorses to earn extra family income. And if there is any ethical message you take away from today, realize that this is the case throughout the world. Look at what you're buying and find out if it is a compassionate source, or if children are picking coffee beans or cocoa or used in factories. In the early 1800s, people saw often children just as little adults who needed no coddling, no special attention. Philippe Arié, who is a historian, said that these attitudes were prevalent all the way back to the 17th century, when paintings and gravestones and furniture and school records indicated that children were seen as mini adults. It was both inaccurate and harmful, according to the reformers of the time. And Eugene Field agreed. He believed that society had done a very poor job of acknowledging and nurturing the natural goodness of children. In fact, he thought that society had corrupted kids. According to Conroe, Field deplored the methods in school, church, and home which insisted upon filling children with mundane facts while turning them into priggish, pretentious adults, end quote. Now, in thinking about his own formal education, Field wrote that, quote, setting me at Latin at the age of 6 was simply a crime. At the end of the 19th century, educational theory was shifting. It was not about pouring information into empty containers. Americans were developing a more sentimental view of children as unique and fragile and precious creatures to be protected and nurtured. Their value was switching from economic to emotional. Their value prompted a vision where adults would idealize their children and their own childhood. And they'd imagine childhood as an idyllic time of carefree wonder. Field wanted to take his readers and himself to that world where childhood was special, rich, and magical. Now, it's due to his credit that Field didn't think his fame was because he had some amazing genius about childhood or poetry. He actually believed that his success was due simply to the fact that his own perspective lined up with the growing desire of Americans to treat children as special. Field wrote that his popularity grew, quote, because my sympathies and the public's happened to run on parallel lines just now. That's all. Well, thank goodness for that shift in public sympathies about childhood. It was ethically long overdue. In the mid-19th century, America, prior to this change, children were considered property of their parents. Some of it was based on the writings of William Blackstone, an 18th century British legal authority who insisted that children were legally owned by their fathers, who could force them into harsh labor. Now, admittedly, children had been working on family farms for generations, but normally it was outdoors and under the eyes of their parents. But there was something uglier about the fact that so many parents felt they had to send their children into the midst of urban squalor to make a few pennies. Children were pressured to steal, to scavenge through garbage, or to wander the busy streets selling rags or kindling. As the industrialization accelerated, more and more children worked 60-hour weeks in factories and in mines. Small, nimble bodies with long, thin hands were particularly useful for replacing parts in machinery that could lead them to lose their hands or arms. And if a child died at work, parents could benefit from wrongful death claims. And this was accepted culturally as one of the natural privileges of parenthood. A combination of factors during the 19th century changed this mindset. First, standards of living rose, which decreased the pressure on families to get extra income. Second, the growth of tabloids and reporters that talked about the horrible conditions and injury and death suffered by children. And third, the growth of social work, one of the only professions that women were allowed to enter, promoted proper child rearing as important for civic health. The well-being of young people began to have political currency. Nevertheless, even in 1900, the census indicated that at least 2 million children under the age of 16 had full-time jobs. There was a poignant story in the 1906 edition of Cosmopolitan magazine that evokes shame over how America's capitalism violated some basic ethical assumptions about children that we have today. It told of a Native American chieftain who was given a tour of New York. They showed him the towering skyscrapers and the majestic Brooklyn Bridge. He saw masses of people enjoying urban nightlife and entertainment. But he also saw many of the poor people huddled in alleyways and decaying tenements. And after his tour, his host asked the chief, "What is the most surprising thing you have seen?" And the chieftain replied soberly and sadly with 3 words: small children working. Progressive and social leaders began working harder to protect children. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee was created with our own Felix Adler as its first chairperson. In 1909, the White House Conference on Children was convened. In 1913, the Department of Labor started the Children's Bureau that investigated and reported on, quote, all matters pertaining to the welfare of children and child life among all classes. And it supported state and local agencies working to protect children from neglect and abuse. Now, employers pushed back forcefully. They feared the slippery slope of government intervention, and the private sector lobbied against all legislation. The Supreme Court, which was very sympathetic to business, things don't change sometimes, declared many laws restricting child labor unconstitutional. This is despite the fact that most Western governments had heavily regulated or outlawed child labor. But in the 20th century America, it was left to private entities to support children. The YMCA, the Boy Scouts of USA, both founded in 1910, were 2 of the organizations working to promote healthy lifestyles for urban youth. They gave them an alternative to the streets, they taught them about exercise, and so did many ethical culture projects for young people, settlement houses founded by our movement, job training centers, athletic clubs. It was not until 1938 the federal government actually regulated the age limits, hours, and working conditions for children. President Franklin Roosevelt declared, "It must not be a moment forgotten that the core of any social plan must be the child." And that plan, he argued, should not be treating children as a way to make money. Now, after the crash of 1929, it was awfully hard for many families struggling to make ends meet. They claimed that it was immoral for the government to make children economically useless. That was a term they used. But the advocates for child labor legislation persisted, arguing, quote, true parental love could only exist if the child was defined exclusively as an object of sentiment and not as an agent of production. Sociologist Vivian Zelizer noted that the growing acceptance of the concept that it's okay to have, quote, economically worthless children. Emotionally, however, children were priceless. What mattered most, what was in the heart. And that's what Field tapped. Critics and readers loved how he could, quote, force a smile even when a tear lingered in the eye. A reviewer said he dipped his pen into the inkstand of the heart. A Chicago reviewer said that Field's pen was dipped in tears and tenderness. By 1900, there was a romantic reinvention of childhood taking hold. The Swedish feminist Ellen Key predicted in a 1900 published book titled The Century of the Child that the 20th century would become dominated by the rights of the child. All morals and laws and social arrangements, she argued, would center their health and education. These shifts were supported by the growing popularity of what scholars called the companionate family. This was a family that rejected old patriarchal views of the family and endorsed a more democratic approach. Social scientists and educators advocated giving children greater freedom from parental control, greater latitude in expressing themselves, and increased interaction with adolescents and their friends. This downplayed power and control as the central part and intensified emotional relations in families. This led to a rise of a new genre of children's literature praising the sanctity of the child. Authors began to write humorous, child-oriented books more attuned to the child's imagination. And that's why I think many of Field's poems began to light a public interest in this. Often his poems began as if he was talking to a child and then shifted into first person, and it would make it more personal and appealing to parents. And the tragic loss of so many young children to diphtheria and dysentery runs through Field's work. The crown jewel that you'll hear in a moment is Little Boy Blue. As Conroy framed it, in this poem, the toy soldier and other toys remain loyal to the memory of the boy remaining on the shelf where he placed them. And it symbolized how parents found it hard, even impossible, to ever get over the death of a child. Though dusty and rusting, the toys remained like memories parents have of their children, frozen in time. The last poem will be performed today after Little Boy Blue is Sometime. It explores the theme of mortality, but more through the lens of an adult. It acknowledges the inevitability of death, of which the young are often blissfully unaware, but parents are so aware. Rollin told me a story, actually, that Eugene Field and his wife Julia would travel with the family always, but one time they were going to travel without them. But they kept putting off the trip because they didn't want to leave their children. But finally they got up the guts and they tucked them into their cots, and he went into the room and looked at them all sleeping in their beds. And then he wrote this poem called Sometime. One critic praises it as both personal and universal, the preoccupation with mortality being something that we have to deal with in the human condition. I hope that we appreciate the depth of poignancy of these final two poems and songs.
The little toy dog is covered with dust, but sturdy and staunch he stands. And the little toy soldier is red with rust, and his musket molds in his hands. Time was when the little toy dog was new, and the soldier was passing fair. And that was the time when our little boy Blue kissed them and put them there. Now don't you go till I come, he said, and don't you make any noise. So toddling off to his trundle bed, he dreamt of the pretty toys. And as he was dreaming, an angel song awakened our little boy Blue. Oh, the years are many, the years are long, but the little toy friends are true. Aye, faithful to little boy Blue, they stand each in the same old place, awaiting the touch of a little hand, the smile of a little face. And they wonder, as waiting the long years through, in the dust of that little chair, what has become of our little boy Blue, since he kissed them and put them there. The little toy dog is covered with dust, but sturdy and staunch he stands. And the little toy soldier is red with rust, and his musket molds in his hands. Time was when the little toy dog was new, and the soldier was passing fair, and that was the time when our little boy Blue kissed them and put them there. Now don't you go till I come, he said, and don't you make any noise. So toddling off to his trundle bed, he dreamt of the pretty toys. And as he was dreaming, an angel song awakened our little boy Blue. So many the years are long, but the little toy friends are true. Aye, faithful to little boy Blue, they stand, each in the same old place, awaiting the touch of a little hand, the smile of a little face. And they wonder, as waiting the long years through, in the dust of that little chair, what has become of our little boy Blue, since he kissed them and put them there.
Sometime. Last night, my darling, as you slept, I thought I heard you sigh, And to your little crib I crept and watched a space thereby. And then I stooped and kissed your brow, and oh, I love you so. You are too young to know it now, but sometime you shall know. Sometime when in a darkened place where others come to weep, your eyes shall look upon a face calm in eternal sleep. The voiceless lips, the wrinkled brow, the patient smile shall show. You are too young to know it now, but sometime you may know. Look backward then into the years and see me here tonight. See, oh my darling, how my tears are falling as I write. And feel once more upon your brow the kiss of long ago. You are too young to know it now, but sometime you will know.
Last night, my darling, as you slept, I thought I heard you sigh, and to your little crib I crept, and watched a space thereby. And then I stooped and kissed your brow, for oh, I love you so. You are too young to know it now, but sometime you shall know. Sometime when in a darkened space where others come to weep, your eyes shall look upon a face calm in eternal sleep. The voiceless lips, the wrinkled brow, the patient smile shall You are too young to know it now, but pour upon your brow the kiss of long ago. You are too young to know it now, but sometime you will
Thank you, Rollin, for suggesting this program, for composing the music, Robert, for putting the music into words and singing it and bringing it to us today in its first rendition. Hopefully it'll get shared worldwide with our recordings. Well known during his life, but I didn't know about him before Rollin brought me this information about Eugene Field. I knew about Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. I didn't know about the man. And it spread well beyond his lifetime in the U.S. and to the remotest places in the world. Even today, it's being read, Little Boy Blue, on the Shetland Islands outside of the North Atlantic. In St. Louis, his house is a museum. In Denver, his home is a library. Luminaries like Mark Twain and Theodore Dreiser sang his praises. There are monuments commemorating two of his poems in Chicago's Lincoln Park and Denver's Washington Park. Schools are named after him. And in Missouri, there's a day dedicated on the day that he died, Eugene Field Day. But unlike 100 years ago, Eugene Field's no longer a household name. His poems, some say, did not rise to the very highest, but he was able to touch some truths that are universal and personal, that are timeless and were right for the time. I think they're right again, and I hope that our program today, as it touched hearts of millions, touched yours today. So thank you again, Robert and Rollin.